Hi, welcome to a Further Inquiry podcast. I'm Matthew Genorio, Editor-in-Chief of Further Inquiry. Further Inquiry is a place for playing gracefully with ideas. We are a reader-supported publication for free inquiry, brazen critique, and dissenting ideas.
Hi, and I'm Khadija Khan, a journalist and editor at A Further Inquiry. Matthew and I jointly host this podcast monthly. You can support our work by becoming a paid subscriber to A Further Inquiry today.
Well, hello everyone. We are here again with the brilliant Khadija Khan, and we have with us today Nico Alma. Nico, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic, and I have to say to our guests who don't realize we've had a lot of kerfuffles and funny tech issues on our end. So this has been a funny, long little evening, but I'm happy to have you on here, Nico, this evening my time and very late your time, to talk about your work. For those who don't know you, let's jump right into it. What should those who are not yet familiar with you or your work, what should they familiarize themselves with?
Yeah, there's work and there is activism.
Right.
I'm and sometimes they overlap. Let's put it like this. I'm a political activist for secularism, for the separation of republic and religion, or state and church, because
Mhm.
Austria is mostly Catholic, so we do have a huge Catholic church. I ran a nationwide petition in 2013 for the separation of church and state, and I published a book on the same matter in 2019. It's
Mhm.
only available in German though, and did various other things like importing the atheist bus campaign from the UK to Austria in
Mhm.
2009 and loads of smaller things. And I also co-founded a political party. They're called NEOS. It's a liberal party, but not in the liberal sense that is used in the United States. It's not a left-leaning party, it's a centrist party.
Mhm.
We are actually in government right now. I used to be MP in that party from 2013 to 2017, and now I work for the party in the background, do communications for that political party. So this is where political activism actually becomes politics, but I didn't bring my issues to the party, so this is still separated. But these are
Brilliant. Yes.
the most
And
important things. Yeah.
and, and do you find like, because you are an entrepreneur and publicist, do you find you have different insights coming to it from both realms, both as an entrepreneur, as a European as well, that is a point as well, as an Austrian, and as a publicist, do you find you have a fuller spectrum on looking at these issues, especially when it comes to separation of church and state and all the um, aspects that come with that, specifically with the idea of blasphemy, the idea of of laicite and the act of separation, both in the public space and in media and in politics specifically.
Yeah, I think I do have a very broad sense of how um, state, society, and religion interact in Austria, specifically because it's different in every country. I had to learn. So, as a publicist, I mean, or even as a politician, there is not so much interference of religion anymore. There's no real direct exertion of religious power within politics. But every now and then, something pops up that is really disturbing, where religion does interfere, or where religious beliefs of politicians interfere in media, in politics itself. There are certain touchy issues. So there is still a residuum of a fair amount of religion that we have to take into account in social interaction and social interaction and policy making.
Right.
So as we were discussing about the Austrian society and how religion works in political and social and educational sphere in Austria, which seems to be quite different from the concept of laicite or the British, secularism or what we have in Canada. It's quite different. We see a huge influence of religious belief and religious traditions on Austrian politics. And of course, it will be in social discourse as well. So there is a particular, concerns about, the Sharia, the existence of Sharia councils and the Sharia influence in the legal proceedings related to civil matters. So, how do you see the role of these councils in
Mhm.
Austria, where there is already lots of influence of religion and from religion?
Yeah, first of all, we don't really have a history of Sharia councils in Austria. We just recently had one case, so it's not a practical problem. From a theoretical standpoint, I do have let's say, an ambivalent view on this. First of all, there is such a thing as private law where you're allowed to form contracts. And if we specify in this contracts that before we go to a real court, we have some other entity that we think should decide on this that matters, that's basically fine. That doesn't have to be a Sharia council. That could be any other private person or private institution. So I think we shouldn't, on a theoretical ground, discriminate against any form of belief or private institution here. On the other hand, of course, this could be a slippery slope. If we grant specifically a Sharia council certain privileges, a certain form of interaction in our laws, this could become a problem if this becomes some sort of something that grows bigger and bigger and takes into account points of view from religious traditions that are a problem within our in our judicial system, because we already know that Sharia law is not compatible with our secular laws.
Right.
And by knowing this, we already know that there is a problem, and we cannot tolerate a different type of judicial system within our system. That's not possible. I mean, and that extends to other aspects of life, like the headscarf band that we're probably going to discuss. So there is a certain argument why we shouldn't allow this.
Now, I'm curious too. Do you find, and this might be interesting for Khadija too, because I wonder what your answer would be on this. Do you find there is a difference in approach, whether it be political or social, with those countries in Europe who are like, let's compare it to the UK, for example. That's what I'm getting at. Those who are predominantly Protestant countries or nations, and those who are more Catholic countries, nations in Europe, with their approach to Islamist activities and Sharia law, or the possibility of implications of Sharia law.
That goes out to Kadisha, that question, right?
It's to
No,
you.
it's for you.
Yes.
I'm just curious how Khadija being that atheist, I wonder how she would in this interaction, because I come from a Catholic background myself, Italian
Yeah.
Catholic background, but very much atheistic in my approaches. But do you think there's a different approach in predominantly Catholic countries in Europe versus those who are more Protestant?
Um, Very good question. I mean, in in my interest or in my personal history dealing with the separation of church and state or republic and religion in various systems, I figured that it's different in all countries, even though some countries are really similar, like Germany and Austria. We have a really different approach of handing out those privileges to churches. In Germany, there's no such thing as laws for religions, but in Austria, we have a funny situation that one of the oldest laws for religion is actually the law for Islam, which was established in 1912, while we still had the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Austria became a republic in 1918, so that was a couple of years later. And in Germany and Austria, the concordates with the Holy See were formed in 1933, like the Austrian concordate with the Vatican. So we already had a law for Islam in place, and then the Republic decided to establish a model of cooperation with a specific religion, granting them very special privileges. And in order not to discriminate, the Republic elevated 15 other religions into almost the same status. But it's not quite the same status. So the Republic discriminates between Catholic Church, Protestant Church, which has less privileges, then Judaism, Buddhism, and then at the bottom is Islam, which has the least privileges of all religions in those privileged status. So it's a very complicated and complex system that differs a lot from the UK, differs completely from France, is a bit similar to Germany, but different than any other country. So there are really different approaches in dealing with religion. And the Nordic countries that are Protestant, they very often had state churches up until the end of the 90s. And there is still a state church in Iceland, I believe. But there, the church has been fully domesticated and doesn't really, I mean, people are really, they're almost indifferent towards religion in those countries. They're basically agnostic, atheist, but
Mhm.
still member of the church because the church is almost fully integrated into the state. There is a good book by Phil Zuckerman, Society Without God. He conducted a huge study in Denmark and Sweden, and he basically found out that people don't care about religion. They care so little that they don't even care about the separation of church and state anymore. For them, it's just like this is like floating over to tradition, doesn't really interfere in the laws anymore or in society on a broad scale. So yeah, there is a completely different approach between Protestant church and the Catholic church in Europe.
I have a question because, as you explained, that religions they enjoy certain privileges in Austrian society. So now there has been a raging debate about banning burqa in Austria, and I think the proposal to ban the burqa has been presented in the parliament, in Austrian parliament, and the French they put this ban on hijab, niqab, on burqa on the basis of banning, all religious symbol in public and political spheres. And then there is Portugal recently, the example of Portugal, they have banned the burqa and niqab over the concerns related to security and in order to, counter radical Islam. And then there is Italian Prime Minister. She is, proposing to ban burqa and niqab because they want to, counter radical Islam in their society. And there are also security issues, related to this one attire. So on what basis this attire can be banned in Austrian society where religions they enjoy certain privileges under the law.
Yeah, this is really you're pointing out a really funny situation here because in Austria, Islam is a privileged religion. It is granted freedom of religion to a larger extent than other beliefs that are not having the same rights. At the same time, the state says that a headscarf for a young girl is not okay because the headscarf is a symbol of oppression. So the state points out there is a problem in a certain religion that is being granted special privileges at the same time. This is a contradiction. So the basic argument is that the headscarf, the hijab, the burqa, the niqab, whatever the veiling is called, is a symbol of oppression. That's a problem. And the law that was that drafted and has been now in a phase of evaluation, or how can we put it, consultation, where there are certain organizations they can object to the law and they can recommend changes. So in this consultation phase, there the we so yeah, I haven't explained what is actually drafted in the law. There is in the draft it says that girls below ninth grade, so from grade 1 to 8, below the age of 14, they're not allowed to wear a headscarf in school, and it's just for girls and it's just for Islamic headscarves. And this is deemed unconstitutional by many organizations and individuals in that consultation phase. And now that law is probably going to be altered or repaired so it becomes constitutional. One trick that one of the parties in power the Conservative Party tried to apply was to put the law into the rank of the Constitution, so it cannot become unconstitutional. But this is it's almost a magic trick that they shouldn't really pull off. The the other option would be, of course, to ban all sorts of religious headgear for all students or pupils below 14, but that would also include the turban of the Sikhs and the Jewish kippah, of course. And banning the Jewish kippah in an Austrian school is impossible. This cannot be done. So the the law cannot be gender neutral or cannot be applied to all religions.
But
So
there is this reason to ban this one attire, which is this is a tool of oppression for girls and women. And basically, my argument is that this is not prescribed in Islam for children. I mean, children not are not obliged to wear any niqab, hijab, or any sort of modest attire in Islam. This is a sham cultural practice in reality. However, this has been given, religious position and privilege in Western societies under the pretext of religious tolerance. I would say that if we have this one reason to ban this attire for the primary school children or for the secondary school girls, I think it should be enough to consider, by the legislature or the politicians or the people, ordinary people, to understand that it is a problematic attire. It is not a benign piece of garment.
Mhm.
It is highly misogynistic. And when you put it on children, you are actually sexualizing children by treating them as an adult
Yeah.
woman.
But it's also a challenge to put that into words that fit the Constitution. I mean, this is something we can probably agree on here, and I think in the first draft this hasn't been done in a way that's really that can really pass Parliament. Let's say. I mean, we will see. We will see what happens. It will. There will be decisions in the next few days on how to put that into a wording that's constitutional. But but as you pointed out, I mean, it is a piece of oppression that cannot, yeah, you cannot put that argument aside. And I mean, it doesn't have to be like in the law. I think you don't really need to specify that it only applies to girls. I mean, that's unnecessary. You could put in like a gender neutral term like just students,
Mhm.
like any gender. It doesn't matter. If,
But
if if boys are not forced to wear a headscarf, then even better.
and we don't listen to or watch or see any instance where people are being tortured for not wearing kippah or turban, you know.
Hmm.
We see this kind of torture and ostracization yeah, only in such instance where girls they refuse to wear it. Even in the West, there have been reported incidents where girls and women they were subject to unabated violence by their own family members because they refused to wear hijab or they refused to wear burqa or they refused to be an obedient Muslim woman. So I think,
But then also these actions should be punished, of course. I mean,
yeah,
this is also a problem when it comes to, I don't know, beatings of women or whatever happens. This should also be punished, and this doesn't happen either. So also the consequences of not wearing that attire have to follow. But
that's
but let me point out again to that very special situation in Austria where it's really not that easy to put it into a law because we have on the one side we have Islam and the law for Islam and that elevates Islam to a certain position that you cannot discriminate against Islam. You always have to take all religions into account. You have to pass a law that's valid for all religions. So this is not that easy because the Constitutional Court has already thrown out a similar law in 5 years ago because they are kind of making the same mistake again. And if we want the Austrian Parliament to pass a law like that, they should work on it a little more because otherwise the Constitutional Court will stop it again.
how do you see this problem of integration in Austria? Because this has been a subject of wider debate across the Europe, in Canada, in America, that the certain section of religiously conservative communities they have been, isolated. It can be a voluntary isolation, in certain cases where people they have there have been, ethno religious enclaves across the European society, in Canadian society, in American society. So, how do you see this issue being discussed and talked about in Austria in the context of Austrian society?
Um, I think that I view that as an optimist. I think the debate has become more honest. We didn't have an honest debate 10 years ago where we had that huge influx of people fleeing or just migrating from the Middle East to Austria and Germany, especially, and also Sweden. Back then, it was like, yeah, either either we accept all these people or otherwise we are xenophobe in a way. So there was no gray area in between. It was all very black and white. And now these gray areas, in a positive sense, have evolved. So we're able to discuss all the problems that have been arising from that. Also, are the schools in Austria are really overpopulated. They're crowded. Overpopulated is the wrong term, but they're crowded because we not only have immigrants from those regions, but we also have very many refugees from the Ukraine since that war started. So this is a huge problem. I don't know, Vienna alone, they need 40 new classrooms each month or something like that. So it's a pretty big number. But it's getting better because I think now there's not so much, even the political left is a lot more open to discuss what's actually happening and how to address problems from a huge number of people migrating to Austria and how to integrate them. So I I think these are problems that can be solved. Crime rates are really low. Whether are in to which extent they're really connected to migration is a whole different issue, but I wouldn't blow it up. It's really not a huge problem in Austria, to be honest.
In terms of integration, you see
In
that the communities, they have been assimilated in Austrian society quite well.
quite well, I would say, quite well, yeah.
So
And
what is the magic behind it? Because we are struggling, in the UK, we are struggling in the US, we are struggling in Canada. It's not like not in terms of all the immigrants, it's
mhm,
or all the communities. It's about certain section where uh, which are religiously conservative mostly. There has been unwillingness in terms of
mhm,
assimilating with the wider society, and then it's causing problem when there
mhm.
is a clash between certain section of the society with the mainstream society.
I'm well aware. I mean, well aware is a bit exaggerated, but I'm acquainted with the situation in the UK. I'm not there very often, but I'm interested in what's happening, and I think it's different than in Austria. In Austria, I wouldn't say that the magic has worked already, but I think we are on a good trajectory here. We had the capacity to take in migrants, and the influx kind of stopped recently, and we can deal with it at the given time. And conservative enclaves, I don't really see them, to be honest. There is no, I mean, there is parts of Vienna, of course, where there is certain ethnic communities, but this is to a lot smaller extent than, for example, in Berlin. Berlin is still pretty similar to Austria in many ways, or to Vienna, but it's different. It's a lot less still.
Would you
I,
say that has to do with, now this is just an outsider looking in, would you say that has to do with historical reasons, preservation of culture, a kind of um, adherence to Austrians love Austrian culture? I mean, the differentiation between an Austrian and a German is quite always funny to an outsider looking in. But would you say it has to do with
mm,
this historical appreciation? And as a side note to that, would you say it is, side question, you said the raising of Islam to equal level, law from 1912, you said,
mhm.
right? Does that correlate with interactions, like presumably interactions with the Ottoman Empire?
Um, of course, yeah. Um, there, I cannot go back that far into history because I'm not a very good historian. I know it in those areas where I need to know it, but there there has been, of course, in the 17th century, the Ottoman Empire reached all the way to Austria, and the Turkish were fought back in 1683. So the but I cannot really draw a direct line from then to the last century, and I really that's an interesting theory. But I think
The reason I say that, like, I'm
yeah.
going to cut you off. The reason I say that is because whether it's, the adherence to Catholicism in Catholic countries in Europe, and not the adherence like the devotee, you might say like a century plus ago, or the Protestant who the Protestant work ethic and all that goes on in the Protestant approach to Christianity. But in both cases, if you just use Christianity as a broad strokes, there's been a reformation. There's been
Mhm.
a reformation of the religion. Islam has not had that. And the approach is different. I mean, you are still dealing individual Muslims of certainly. I don't think anyone would disagree that individual Muslims have what I might define as a self-reformation, modernization, self-reformation, bringing bringing themselves on an individual level into the 21st century with values and approaches to religion. But Islam as a whole has not. So it's not like you're interacting necessarily from a religion to religion, not person to person. You're not interacting with something at par in that sense.
Certainly not. Certainly not. I mean, yeah, I can follow your argument here, but I probably didn't get the point here. I, I mean, I do understand.
Mhm.
Islam hasn't gone through a reformation or through enlightenment, so it's still not compatible with a secular state. I mean,
Precisely.
whereas the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, they're not perfectly, but they are to a large extent very compatible with a secular state.
Mhm.
Also, as I was pointing out before, in Nordic countries, like religion kind of evaporates or has lost its power completely. This is not the case for the Catholic Church in Germany, Italy, Austria, but certainly true for the Protestant churches. And the Islam as a religion always uh, always sees a certain identity between state and religion. I mean,
Mhm.
a non-political Islam simply does not exist. This is doesn't matter how many people point out that you have to see the true religion, but aside from the state, but this is simply not the matter. If you look to Islamic countries, then you will see that this is a highly political religion, and this is also a kind of yeah, it's the same thing more or less.
Very well said. I totally agree with this point that people they do want to, make distinction between Islam as a religion and then there is a political Islam or Islamist ideology. I think it is Islam in itself, and if we have to, deal with the with certain problematic, areas and issues related to Islam and associated with Islam, we have to, discuss Islam as a whole, as a whole system. We cannot make, these exceptions for the religion that people practice. I think we all, if we have to draw a distinction, that needs to be drawn between Muslims as people and Islam as a set of belief.
Mhm.
We don't have to make any distinction between Islam and any aspect of Islamic ideology. So this is an ideology, and that needs to be scrutinized on all levels. In my humble opinion, that if we have to defend the secular democratic values that we even Austrian society I see like they are not very much in favor of, you can say, or not very willing to have total separation between the religion and state. Yet there are laws. I would say it's not like totally based on religion, which discriminate against other religious belief and other group of people. So there is, I think, a high time. There is a high time at this moment in Europe, in the West as a whole, that we need to talk about the values we stand up for, Otherwise, there is a tide, and that tide is getting, intense. People, they don't see it. However, the problem we are having here in the UK, it's strange because the influence of certain, minority, which is very vocal, influential, and assertive, in their beliefs, in their rigid and orthodox Islamic beliefs, they are gaining momentum, and we see their influence in social and political discourse. They are influencing now policies. So I think that that is very problematic if we let it continue the way it is.
Mhm. Yeah, with a look to the UK, I think it is a problematic development, and I've heard many horror stories of British MPs and their opinions. This is unthinkable of in Austria, Germany, but specifically Austria. Also, the climate against accepting a very not even radical but very traditional form of Islam is has been getting lower. The left is not really vocal about that, but we do have a very large populist right. You might know there is the Austrian Freedom Party, and in polls they are polling at 35%. At the last elections, they were just below 30%. So they have become huge. They are, of course, they 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 include the whole spectrum of xenophobe ideas, of course, but part of the criticism is, of course, valid. And the Conservative Party is very much trying to emulate the Freedom Party here. So we have two right parties that together have a solid majority that are very, very strong against Islam. That headscarf ban is one law that was unthinkable of in the past few years because also we had a conservative green government. It would have been impossible then. But yeah, there is the one thing that that makes me wonder is, I mean, they're really trying to push back conservative Islamic views, but on the other hand, they are not even talking about taking back that law for Islam. I think that would be, in my opinion, the logical step. If you think there is a religion that poses a certain threat to the way we live here, then why not just take away their special privileges? I mean, they still have all the same rights that
Exactly.
everybody else has. Yeah, you
Exactly.
don't have to grant them special rights. And while you're at it, you can take away all the privileges from all the other religions as well. But
Exactly.
this is an argument that's almost impossible to
Well,
make.
on that note, Nico, I'd like to say let this be part one of part two. I'd
Yeah,
like to continue this conversation because I think this is a very developing one, and I'd like to
yeah,
say, let's further this inquiry to a next
yeah.
time. For now,
Would
let's
you?
let's close
Well
and say
said.
thank you, Nico, for coming on for part
Yeah,
one of this continuous conversation. Till next time.
Thank you
yeah.
so much. Thanks a
Glad to
lot.
be back. Thank you.